All right, now we've got some stories here that are disturbing throughout the country. First of all, we've got a 12-year-old girl, Dejamon Baker. She was out shopping with her mom. Her mom was at Victoria's Secret. Apparently, her mom was wanted on very important arrest warrant for traffic violations. So the cops go in to get them, and what do? They think the 12-year-old girl is a danger to the cops, so they tase her. Now, this is in a suburb of St. Louis, and we've got a report from St. Louis's NBC affiliate KSDK here explaining more.
This what was in my chest, it was stuck in her, so she had to keep on pulling, trying to pull it out.
Dejamon Baker displays the results of a tangle with the business end of a taser. She has a matching wound on her stomach.
I had fell on the floor, and I was like, I couldn't control myself. Like, I just kept on shaking and stuff. He said, put your hands behind your back. I said, for what? Next thing you know, he tackled me down on the ground. I was just crying. I guess he got mad because I was crying or something. And he should have had enough control to tell her to get back instead of pulling out his gun. I guess he was nervous or whatever and tasing people.
We got to stop with the tasers. It's out of control. Against a 12-year-old, how much of a threat could she have been? In March, a 9-year-old got tased in Ohio. In June, Chicago cops tased an 8-month-old pregnant lady. Stop tasing people. Now, I know you're not shooting them and you think, well, hey, at least I didn't put a bullet in them. No, a taser is not a gun. It's not harmless. You don't do it to a child. If you can't control a 12-year-old without tasing him, there's something wrong with you. Now, speaking of something wrong with the cops, well, the next story makes it seem much, much worse. 21-year-old Travis Carter was in Jonesboro, Arkansas. Cops pull him over along with a couple other people. He's in the passenger seat. They find some marijuana. Oh, no, marijuana. Well, obviously, then they got to go through the whole rigmarole. They search him twice. They find out he's wanted on a warrant in Mississippi. Oh, that's it. They handcuff him. They put him in the back of the police car. And then they claim that they heard a shot and that while he was handcuffed with his hands behind his back, that he somehow committed suicide by shooting himself in the head. Really? Well, we've got a report from WREG in Memphis, Tennessee, and we're going to hear from Sergeant Lyle Waterworth on that.
As protocol, he was handcuffed behind his back, double locked, and searched.
Handcuffed, double locked, and searched. But somehow, minutes later, police say they heard a thumping noise, turned around, and found Chavis dead, shot in the head in the back of the squad car.
Just somehow. Well, you know, Travis Carter's mother says that, in fact, the cops told her that he was shot in the right temple. The problem is he's left-handed. The other problem is he was handcuffed and had his hands behind his back. The third problem was they had searched him several times and hadn't seen a gun. So this story is incredibly weird and problematic. So let's hear from that mother now, Teresa Carter.
I can't see how. I can't see how. I think they killed him. I mean, my son was suicidal. They searched him twice. I mean, I just want to know what really happened.
Well, the two officers who were involved there are now on just administrative leave while they investigate, and they do have to have time to investigate here, of course, but local police are also justifying it this way.
Any given officer has missed something on a search, you know, be it drugs, be it knives, be it razor blades. This instance happened to be a gun.
Yeah, that's how it happened to be, apparently, if you believe the police. All right, now let's bring in the professor, one of our contributors here, Professor Tricia Rose from Brown University. Professor Rose, great to have you here. So let's talk about both these cases. You know, Chavis is the much more heartbreaking one. I want to save him for a second. Let's talk about the tasing incident. Does the fact that she was in a suburb of St. Louis have any relevance here, Professor Rose?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm really shocked by the idea that she should be thrown to the ground for asking questions, even if she, you know, was curious about why. But these were traffic stops. But I do think it might be relevant. So as your viewers probably know, St. Louis is a city that has nearly 50% African-American population, about 48, 49, and a white population of about 45%. But the Melville suburb, which is an inner ring suburb of St. Louis, actually is 97% white, 0.13% African American. So this isn't a neighborhood or an area where you're likely to have lots and lots of African Americans. That raises the potential that racial stereotyping and anxiety could drive a policeman to behave in the kind of negatively racial profiling ways that African Americans face all the time. And it's one of the reasons that this kind of very chosen segregation can reproduce the stereotypes that predominate in society.
And it's a vicious cycle, because if the cops got it in his head that African Americans are more dangerous, even a 12-year-old girl might seem dangerous to him.
I mean, listen, what 12-year-old kid wouldn't either cry out or maybe try to stop someone? She says she didn't, but I would do it if someone were throwing my mother to the ground and handcuffing her aggressively as a 12-year-old or a teenager. I would be outraged, and I would be scared, and I would be exhibiting emotional things that would be very intense. That's what young people do. I thought that's what police training was for. And if you look at this young girl, she's incredibly small. And he doesn't, by the way, Cenk, the cop doesn't make the claim that she attacked him or anything. He says she impeded or got in his way. And so it seems to me that this is really the kind of humiliating and violent, aggressive treatment for a very small kind of infraction for traffic warrants. Yeah. And it's really systemic. It's very important to pay attention to this.
And I want the audience to understand that. Look, take out the racial component. For traffic warrants now, we're getting our 12-year-old kids tased. I mean, look at how they treat us. Look at how they treat people who don't have tremendous power. And look, imagine if you're in Beverly Hills. You think they're going to tase a, white or otherwise kid in Beverly Hills? They're not going to do that. You think they're going to tase Mitt Romney's 12-year-old girl? He doesn't have one. But if he did, they're not going to do it. All right, so now let's go on to the even more serious case, Chavez Carter, right? So here, this appears to be the most incredible statement I've ever seen. I mean, it reminds me of a story we did on the Young Turks a long time ago about some Central Asian republic where a political opponent was shot twice in the head and once in the heart, and they said he committed suicide. I mean, does it seem conceivable that this could have been a suicide?
I mean, here's the thing, Cenk. I've been thinking about this. It's either it's entirely true, and that would be like Vegas odds. I mean, it's so insane that, it's like winning $100 million at Vegas. Or it's the most insane lie that tells us something very important. That is to say that these cops know ultimately that they have so much power and control in setting the terms and the narrative of what happens, the story, and when they create a situation where there are no witnesses, the other two boys in the truck were sent off. They weren't arrested, they weren't held, just this one in the truck. And so now there are no witnesses. So they know they have so much control over the story, and there's so much fundamental disregard of black life. I mean, that's really an important part of this story, that just the fundamental disregard of black life, that they don't have to worry about telling such an absurd story, that he's suddenly suicidal, that he's handcuffed behind his back, left-handed, but somehow shoots himself in the right temple. Had called his girlfriend earlier and said that he would be calling her later on, that they had been stopped. So it's just absurd. And just one last thing, Cenk. When you look at the grief on that mother's face and the shock, it just breaks my heart. These things are horrible anyway. But when it seems such a bald case of disregard at the hands of people you're supposed to trust, people whose salaries we pay for, it's an outrage that really the whole country should be up in arms about this kind of thing.
All right, Professor Rose, thank you, and we always appreciate your thoughts and wisdom here. And before we go, I just want to say one last thing again. Look, they're so used to crushing us. And race seems to be a component in these cases, but let's say it's not. Let's assume it's not for a second. For drugs, the guy had marijuana on him, and he winds up shot in the head somehow. The other girl, there was a traffic warrant for her mom. She gets tased. For the smallest infractions, they're willing to take our life away. It seems like there's two different rules in this country. And it's sickening and it's tiring. We got to fight back against it. Unless we can get back our government, get back our democracy, they're going to do this to us left and right. And all that they're going to care about is the rich donors who control the government, who control our politics. That's why all of these phenomenon happen at the same time. That's why we get this sinking feeling in our gut that we're getting screwed, because we are. Whether it was the banking story in the last segment or whether it's these stories, they don't care about us. It's supposed to be our government, but it isn't our government. It's the government of and by and for the rich. They have different rules, and we get these rules and these results. And it's discouraging. We gotta fight back together against it. All right, now when we come back,